We are live on YouTube. Welcome our YouTube audience and welcome our win-win-win audience. So good to have everyone here today. We're going to have a really good conversation, hopefully, about books that you may want to check out regarding the gut microbiome specifically, but your microbiome in general. And I do want to spend a few minutes today talking about the difference because I feel like the two get intertwined and they're not exactly the same. So we're going to be focusing mostly in our Radical Age Reversal series, on taking a deep dive into this new science called the microbiome. And so again, just to review, we talked a little bit about this last week. What is the gut microbiome, or what is the microbiome? So your microbiome is the part of you that is not human. And actually, I'm going to talk about this book in a minute. It's called 10% Human. And if you look at the way the author, Alana Holland, breaks it down, you see that actually when we're talking about human cells that make up tissue, cells that make up your organs, your bones, your muscle mass, all of that, that's only those cells are only 10% of who you are. The rest of you is actually made up of these microbiota. So what's a microbiota? It could be bacteria, it could be a fungus. It's sort of amazing to think that most of who we are is made up of something we can't see. And so it gives you a whole different perspective about your health and what's going on. And one of the cool things to keep in mind is that this microbiome that lives on, in, and around you, that you take with you everywhere you go during the day, it is specifically what keeps us alive. It's what keeps our defense system strong. It's what keeps our hormones in balance. It directs our brain chemistry. It's the center, right? It is like the control center, if you will, of your body. I think, some scientists over the centuries speculated, is your brain the control center? And in other times in history, it was like, is your heart the control center? Like, what does it mean to be fully alive? What's really going on? But what we're kind of learning right now is that it actually may be that your microbiome is the control center. And we've done a lot to actually disturb it. And because we can't see it, right? Let's say, for example, you have psoriasis. You, as a doctor, would look at it, or as a patient would look at it, they would say, oh, there's something wrong with my skin and I need to put something on topically, or sometimes if you go further down the line in science, they'll say you need to take something internally, some kind of medication. We know that there is an interaction, there are systems at play, but what we didn't realize is how tied in those systems are to your microbiome. So the psoriasis actually is now what we know a result of part of your microbiome either having died off or not being fed its proper diet. And I think we talked about this last week a little bit, but just to review, all the chemicals in the world that we come into contact with, whether they're cleaning chemicals, they're food additives, they're chemicals in the things that we sit on, the clothing that we wear, the bags that we have, anything that we come into contact with that's made out of a synthetic chemical, those synthetic chemicals actually interact with your microbiome in a very negative way. And because your microbiome is extremely sensitive to its environment. And since a lot of it is inside of us, one of the things that we know is it's hard to study, because once you take it out of its natural environment where it's warm and dark and specific to different parts of your body, you change its atmosphere. And when you change its environment, you're going to kill it off. So it's a little tricky for scientists to actually replicate outside of the human body the microbiome and the microbiota, these bacteria and fungi especially, and how we can see what they eat and how they react. But we do know that the chemicals that they come into contact with definitely kill them. So in her book, 10% Human, and this would be my first book recommendation, where I'm going to give you several, and you can go ahead and decide which ones are best for you. Her story is really cool because she was doing a project, I believe it was in Africa, in the summer of 2005. Oh, sorry, not Africa, in Malaysia. And she was doing a bat project. And when she was there, she actually was in the jungle and ended up being covered with ticks, over 50 ticks. And some of the ticks actually embedded themselves for too long into her skin. And she ended up very, very sick, which led her to learn about the microbiome because they had given her so many antibiotics. And one of the things that she points out, and also a Dr. William Davis, who is famous for gut belly or wheat belly. If you, I guess I'm sorry, it's not gut belly, it's wheat belly. And his new book, I believe, is Smart, the Smart Gut, or Gut Smart. I'll look that one up. But at any rate, they both talk about antibiotics. And I want you to now, when you hear the word antibiotic, I want you to hear it in its true language, which is against life. Okay, against life. I think when people hear antibiotic, they think, oh, this is great because this is something that cures diseases. And of course, yes, we know that modern antibiotics have done wonderful things when it came to certain diseases, but they don't have a perfect record, and overuse of antibiotics is definitely causing some problem, especially where the microbiome is concerned. So let's go back to our psoriasis example. People with psoriasis often have had several rounds of antibiotics, and they don't have the bacteria needed to get that full skin healing. So you heal your microbiome and you can heal your eczema or your psoriasis. So that's pretty cool. And she definitely did lots of work. She was part of the gut microbiome, American Gut Microbiome Project, which I tried to sign up for the other day, and it's temporarily closed. I guess they have enough samples, but I'm going to keep, it's called the Human, no, it's not the Human Genome Project. She talks about that too, but this is the American Gut Project. So you can, but it's kind of cool to look it up and see what it does. It's the American Gut Project. There's also the British Gut Project. And what they did is actually took stool samples from people all over the world, and they tried to look at what they were eating and what their microbiome looked like. And what she found when she had her sample analyzed was that actually her gut microbiome was not very diverse, that she only had a few strains of bacteria, and that was causing her immune system a huge problem, and it was having a rippling effect in her health. And so she decided that she was going to learn how to feed her microbiome. You know, think of it as of having a rich garden in and around your body. And when I say in, I think people think of just the gut, right? And it is true that most of our gut bacteria lives inside of a part of our digestive systems called the cecum. And that's right at the head of the colon. And that's where the highest concentration is living. However, there are microbiomes in your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, any entry point of your body, in your vaginal canal. Like there's all kinds of different areas where there's microbiome, and you want to keep that microbiome really rich. And so I realized, like, a lot of the perfumes we have, a lot of the cleaners we have, whether they're personal care products, they have a lot of chemicals in it that will disturb your natural microbiome. One of the things that we're learning is actually that chemical-based mouthwashes are very dangerous, which is why I really like the doTERRA On Guard mouthwash, because it uses essential oils. Now, I know essential oils are highly antimicrobial. So I started to get nervous, is using an essential oil going to do the same damage, right? It makes sense to me. What's the difference between an essential oil killing a bacteria or a chemical killing a bacteria? But actually, there is a huge difference, because essential oils, and many of them have been studied for this, or are being studied for this, and I will give you some of the names. They include cinnamon, thyme, oregano, clove, these essential oils, which are known to be highly antibacterial, are also very, very discerning, and they are very selective, which means that when they touch your skin or go into your body, they can select for the bad bacteria and they can preserve the good bacteria. And in fact, we know that actually good bacteria can thrive on essential oils. So essential oils are, and lavender is another one. I'm going to have a couple of them that'll just pop into my head, but it's good to know that if you are an essential oil user, that is actually going to play in your favor by using your essential oils. So the other 90%, let's just talk a little bit. She talks in this book about what the other 90% is. Okay. And I thought this was super interesting. So with just shy of 21,000 genes, the human genome is hardly bigger than that of the worm. So just think of a worm. We're not actually more sophisticated genetically than a worm. It's half the size of the rice plant, and even the humble water flea outstrips it with 31,000 genes. None of these species can talk, create, or think intelligent thoughts. You might think, as scientists entering the gene sweep pool did, that humans would have a great many more genes than grasses, worms, or fleas. After all, genes make proteins and proteins make body. Surely a body as complex and sophisticated as a human would need more proteins and therefore more genes than worms. But these 21,000 genes are not the only genes that run your body. We do not live alone. Each of us is a super organism, a collective of species living side by side and cooperatively running the body that sustains us all. Our own cells, though far larger in volume and weight, are outnumbered 10 to 1. So just imagine that. So look at yourself and magnify yourself by 10. But remember, we're going smaller, but bigger volume. 10 to 1 by the cells of the microbes that live on us. These 100 trillion microbes, known as the microbiota, are mostly bacteria, microscopic beings made of just a single cell each. Alongside the bacteria are other microbes, viruses, fungi, and archaea. Now, an archaea, I found out, is a little bit like a bacteria. Viruses are so small and simple, they can challenge our ideas of what even constitutes life. They depend entirely on the cells of other creatures to replicate themselves. The fungi that live on us are often yeasts, more complex than bacteria, but still small, single-celled organisms. The archaea are a group that appear to be similar to bacteria, but they are often different and evolutionary, as bacteria are from plants or animals. Together, the microbes living on the human body contain 4.4 million genes. So that may be something that surprised you too. It surprised me. So that there are genetics involved in these microbes. They have their own genetics. This microbiome, the collective genome of the microbiota. The genes collaborate in running our bodies alongside our 21,000 human genes. By that count, you are just 0.5% human. So you can see it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as we talk about who we are as humans. Okay, there was a couple other quotes I just wanted to read. So where are they, and how can you picture where these microbiota live? Okay, you are more of them than you are of you, right? Because we have more microbiota than we have human cells. Your gut alone hosts 100 trillion of them, like a coral reef growing on the rugged seabed that is your intestine. Around 4,000 different species carve out their own little niches nestled among folds that give your 1.5 meter long colon the surface area of a double bed. Over your lifetime, you will play host to bugs the equivalent weight of 5 African elephants. That's kind of crazy, right? Your skin is crawling with them. There are more on your fingertip than there are people in Britain. So I love her imaging. You know, one of the reasons I highly recommend this book is just she tells stories. She breaks things down in easy analogies. She uses really great different studies to show and support her information. So I've just kind of started to dive into this book, but I already love it and I highly recommend it. And another thing that I love about it is it talks about how we digest our foods and how animals digest their foods and how we're not all the same, and that each animal, each human, each species has particular bacteria that are there for us so that we can digest the food that we are meant to eat. Because I'll hear people give me the argument of, oh, we shouldn't eat meat because look at a cow. Cows are really, really big and all they eat is grass. So it goes to show that you don't need to be eating meat to have a lot of muscle mass and to be strong. And of course, it is possible, right? We know that. We know very strong, healthy people that are on a plant-based diet. I'm actually not talking about which diets I think are best or not. The point I want to make here is that a cow's stomach, in fact, there are 4 stomachs in a cow, not one, like we have one. A cow's stomach has different microbiome, right? It's different microbiota. That's why cows can eat all that grass and they can be as big as they are. They can produce milk. They can produce meat that we eat. It's very, very different. So I think we have to be super careful not to make presumptions, right? Or draw conclusions about diets, about exercise, about other things, unless we include it in the environment of the microbiome and how we're interacting with our microbiome. So when you are doing things, whether it's breathing, drinking, eating, coming into contact with things, washing your hands, and of course, spraying things, applying things, breathing things, all of that, I want you to ask yourself, is this going to be harmful or helpful to my microbiome? So the big categories we want to keep in mind are anything synthetic and anything that's a chemical, anything that doesn't naturally break down is going to harm your microbiome on some level. And that anything that is natural, that is part of your environment, that is local, that is bioavailable, that's probably going to help your microbiome. So your body's really smart and it's super efficient. So one of the things that you will learn in this book, which I think is really important, is that if you decide that you're going to have a very limited diet, let's say you pick 10 or 12 foods and that's all you plan to eat, your microbiome will adjust. So the bacteria that you need to break down those foods will grow if it's a natural food. So for example, if your diet consists only of packaged foods, artificial flavors, artificial colors, different additives, highly processed foods like enriched wheat and things that, anytime they say enriched, it means they've taken all the nutrition out and they've put synthetic vitamins back in. So just keep that in mind. The biggest categories for that would be cereals and boxes, crackers, and breads. But you'll see it other places as well. So just keep your eye and keep your ears attuned for some of those words, because that's going to make it easier for you to make some good choices about your food groups. So if you're eating those things actually kill the microbiome, and you can actually wipe out whole species of bacteria in your gut, which you don't want to do. What they're not sure is how do you regrow it? One of the things that they do know, and this goes into the column of what you should add into your diet, is you want to add fermented foods, because we know that fermented is different from vinegar. Okay, so a fermented food, which tastes sour, just like vinegar tastes sour, but that sour comes from lactobacillus. And there's lots of different types of bacteria that are really good for our gut, and they're probiotics, and they can be a probiotic like doTERRA PB Assist, which is something you can take in supplement form. It could be something like kefir, which you can get in the refrigerated section of your grocery store or make it at home. It could be some type of fermented cabbage like a sauerkraut or a kimchi. It could be a fermented pickle. Now, pickles that are like in sugar and vinegar are not a probiotic food. You have to get the pickles that are in the refrigerated section that are made and in a way where the bacterias are produced. And those bacteria are really fragile. So that's why they need to be refrigerated. Now, you may ask yourself, well, I love doTERRA PB cyst, but it's not refrigerated. So how is it not killing off the bacteria in that supplement? Well, doTERRA encapsulates their PB assist with a prebiotic. So the prebiotic, which is green, covers the probiotic, which is all that good bacteria, which is white, in one capsule. And so it's like a little mini terrarium. Remember those things you used to make when you were in grade school, where you would put the plant with the water and you'd water it, and then you'd put a case over it and lock it down airtight, and it had its own environment where it could be self-sustaining. Well, this is the same kind of thing that doTERRA has in PB Assist. It's its own environment. So the prebiotic and the probiotic live off of each other and everything works fine. When it gets into your body and it starts to break down, you have that really good probiotic intact. Now, other ways to feed your gut microbiome is to give it a prebiotic. All right. So we've already talked about probiotics, which come in the form of fermented foods, but you can, and supplements, PB Assist, but you also want prebiotics, things like doTERRA greens and doTERRA fiber, and then fibrous fruits and vegetables. These are amazing because those are the exact foods that your gut microbiome wants to eat. So it doesn't want to eat chemicals, doesn't want to eat shelf-stable food. It doesn't want to eat artificial colors and flavors and sugars. What it wants to eat is all natural fruit and vegetable fibers. And those fruit and vegetable fibers will go through your digestive system and become food for your microbiome. So I want you to think about, and I talked about this last week, making a list at the end of the week or before the week, before you go grocery shopping, and to write down at least 30 fruits, vegetables, or spices count, that you're going to use for the week. And make sure you don't have to get 30 a day, but you have to get 30 in a week. And that variety is going to be the thing that's going to feed your microbiome. And what's great about that is it has the power to help you recover your immune system, to help recover really good longevity cells so you live healthier, longer lives. It's going to help your hair grow, your nails grow. It's going to improve your eyesight. It's going to help with your hormone balance. It's going to help your brain function. It's going to help you sleep better. It's going to raise your libido. It's going to give you more energy. It's going to make you happier. It's going to make you more focused. So all of that is controlled by your microbiome, and which leads me to my second book, which I love, which is called The Secret Life of Your Microbiome. Now, this book is much more dense. It's much more scientific. It's also much more expensive. So if you can find it in the library, why don't you start by reading it from the library? And then if this is what I usually do. I start in the library. If I love the book and I say, I have to have this in my collection because I want to be able to refer to it often, then go ahead and buy it. But read it from the library first, and that can save your shelf space for sure. And it's also a little lighter on your wallet. But I haven't finished reading this one either, but this one is for the more scientifically minded. This is for the more casual reader. They're both excellent, and they have great information when it comes to understanding your microbiome and giving you really good advice on how to feed it well. And then if you want to really just focus on the brain-gut connection and how the microbiome fits into that, then I recommend the Mind-Gut Connection. And that is by Emmerin Meyer, also MD. And this talks a lot about the conversation that happens and how things break down. So he talks about Parkinson's. He talks about Alzheimer's disease. He talks about xenoestrogens and the xenobiota, all these like really, really cool things that we may not have thought about. Really, really why diet is super important, more than ever. And then lastly, I want to mention this book by an Indian doctor, a lot of actually books, I should say, He talks a lot about Ayurvedic medicine, which I think is really important for people to incorporate, even if you don't come from a South Asian culture. But it shows you how to look at your body a little bit differently. This is giving you a protocol of overall what you can do to build up your microbiome. And this is going to give you a specific diet plan based on sort of Ayurvedic dietary rules and body types. So there are 4 different general body types, or 3, I should say, 3 body types: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And he goes into how do you choose. I also like this book because it has a quiz that you can take to sort of get an idea of what the health of your microbiome might be right now based on how you answer the questions and how you score with that quiz. And then he gives you some great ideas about helping feed your gut microbiome, from everything from working with your circadian rhythm to optimizing exercise and sleep, how to sleep deeper and better, how to improve your mental state, how to detox from heavy metals. He gives you all kinds of different recipes in the back: roasted asparagus soup, Thai pumpkin soup, baked apples or pears. Really wonderful stuff. So these are the books I've started with on my journey. I hope you'll come along with me and read along with me. If you have books that you'd like to recommend, please put them in the comments section or send me a note, and we will pull those into our discussion as well. Our time has come to a close. I really appreciate your time. We're going to be switching the time of this show in the coming weeks, but I will announce our new time next week. Next week will be our last show in this time slot, but I hope you'll come back. And if you can't meet the new time slot, that you'll take a look at us on YouTube. I really appreciate your time. I'm Carrie Donegan, and we'll see you next week. Go buy some fermented food.